You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Hey, Allison.
Hi, Justin. I am so excited about the guests we have with us today. And yes, I said guests, multiple guests. We tried to attempt something today that we have never done before, which is have more than two guests at a time. And actually, the technology gods did not want that to happen. So one of our guests, the technology didn't work. And so we're going to have two of our guests today and then hopefully add on some insights from our third guest later. But even though it's a little dicey to have three people at a time, it's for a great reason. So you want to share with our listeners what it is we're going to talk about today, or who we have with us today first?
Yeah. So who we have with us today, we have Ella Whitlecroft and we have Glenn Nishida. We're hoping to have Harriette Manis as well, and we'll see if we can get some insight from her to add to the end a little later. But thank you both for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start with, can the two of you tell us who it is that you either care for currently or did care for, where you currently live, and also your age? So typically we don't ask people, our guests on the show, about what their age is, but that is directly related to our topic today. So Ella, can you go first and tell us who you care for, where you live, and what your current age is?
Sure. So I'm 23 and I care for my partner who is 24. And I live in Melbourne, Australia, Victoria, Australia, which you can probably tell from the accent. And my partner has MECFS, and they first developed that when we were 21.
Great. Thanks, Ella. Glenn, how about you?
I am 65 years old, and I currently live in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I cared for two people in my life. So one was my uncle who had severe dementia for 7.5 years. And the latest one was my dad who was on hospice. So and that's my kind of link to caregiving.
Yeah. And both of them lived in your house, didn't they, at the end?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, you probably realized a couple things between all of us here. We're covering a number of time zones, which made this a little challenging to all find some time to get together. But also we're really bracketing a lot of stages of life, a lot of ages here. We've got Ella with her 20s. We've got Allison and myself, who certainly have been involved in caregiving in our 30s and into 40s, and then Glenn, 50s and 60s. So we're really trying to bracket a large range of the experience and kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. And then Harriette, hopefully, if she's able to join us later, is currently 74. And so she's hoping to be able to provide that perspective. So I'm so excited about this topic. It came up actually at a support group. Actually, it was Harriette, I think, who said one day, this is different for me because of the age that I am. And that's kind of where this idea came from. And so, of course, I want to mention that none of us can represent our entire generation, right? And everyone's got different experiences. But I do think it'll be interesting to hear from each of us what it is and how it looked a little different because of the age that we were when we started caregiving and the age that we are now.
So Glenn, can we start with you and kind of talk about that?
Well, sure. My caregiving journey started back when my mid-50s. I was still working as a medical sales rep. And I got a call one day from my uncle's doctor. And he said, hey, your uncle didn't show up for his appointment, and I'm like, well, that's pretty strange because he was so prompt. And so called his home, no one's there. To make a long story very short, he was in his car for 8 hours in his garage. He just got in his car and didn't know how to get out of the car, didn't know where he was going. And so his neighbor found him. And then so we rushed over. And wow, he looked terrible. I mean, he was emaciated. Now, previous to that, I would call him like every, like once or twice a week, saying, "Hey, Uncle, how are you doing?" And well, I'm fine. I go, "You eating?" He goes, "Oh yeah, don't worry about me, I'm good." But little did I know, he wasn't eating. He wasn't eating. He wasn't bathing. He was a mess. And So we got him to the ER because he was malnourished and he was super sick. So he spent about 30 days in the hospital and about another 3 months at a rehab facility. And then we made the decision, my wife and I, to bring him home with us because he was I don't know, like most families have like this one single uncle or auntie who's like, they spoil us rotten when we were small. We would get the best gifts from uncle. And so I decided to take him in because we had room. So that's how my caregiving journey started.
Yeah. So you were 55. You said you were in the middle of working, and was your wife was working at the time as well?
So we're both working. Yeah. And it was rough. I had my own business, so it wasn't as bad because I could work from home. But I would have to go to physician's office to help plan surgeries and stuff. And in the beginning, I would take my uncle with me and sit him in the patient waiting area while I go talk to the doctor. But after about maybe 3 months of that, he would wander into the and it was like, oh, I can't do this. So I had to stop working. And that was super hard, because I still had a mortgage and it was just, it was pretty rough.
Yeah.
But, we all have to do what we got to do. So I stopped working and it was fortunate we could live off the income that my wife was bringing in. So that was nice, so yeah.
Sure.
But yeah.
Not what you expected your mid-50s to be.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah.
And Ella, how about you? What age were you when you began being a caregiver and kind of what was going on in your life at that time?
Yeah. So I was 21 and my partner and I had met at university. So I was studying my undergrad. We both met doing a psychology degree. And so we'd known each other since we were 18. And then right towards the end of lockdowns here in Melbourne, and we had some of the longest lockdowns in the world. So all of the early days of our relationship were spent in lockdown. So already we had that going on. And then right as the lockdowns kind of ended and everyone else was going back to normal, suddenly my partner was really, really unwell. And I'm sure, Justin, you can relate to the not quite knowing what's going on, trying to find answers, the delay in diagnosis, the kind of chaos of those early days, and trying to figure that all out when we were coming out of lockdowns and when I'm trying to study and trying to finish up my degree. That was very, very difficult. And it already kind of felt like we were on the back foot because of lockdowns and because of everything that had been going on in the first years of us being adults, really.
That's an interesting perspective. So you're like around 21. So you're like, I'm adult, here I am. And then this is what the reality was. And so it sounds like maybe other peers were also experiencing this, like coming out of lockdown, but you had this extra thing on top of it as well.
Yeah.
Did your partner's illness impact your ability did you finish school? Did you finish school on the same sort of timeline that you were thinking? Did it impact that at all?
So I did manage to finish my undergrad. I only had a couple units left by that point, and I had some teachers who were very helpful, and others who were not. And all of the help that I got was kind of informal and not through any kind of like plans by the university. But I did manage to finish my undergrad, and I have then gone on to study. I'm doing postgrad study, but it has been much more difficult and is taking me a long time, and I'm having to do it part-time because there just isn't that accessibility for caregivers. That's been my experience. Yeah.
So you're getting your graduate degree now, right? Which is your plan, but it's at a different pace, is it looking different than you had expected it to? What did you think this might look like?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I guess like a lot of people, I was just trying to get through my undergrad and then work out my plans from there. But once I decided this was what I wanted to do, it was with knowing that I would be caregiving at the same time. And I guess I thought it would get easier and there would be more resources available. And And I've found it's just gotten harder and harder. And like, for example, there's something in Australia called the Young Carer Bursary, which is a wonderful government program that's essentially like a scholarship, but it's non-specific to any university. And so you get a certain amount of money if you're a young carer that allows you to keep studying, which is great. And when I first became a caregiver, everyone was like, you should apply for this. It's going to be wonderful. I had multiple services tell me that I should apply. But when I went to apply and I got through the first kind of stage of the application and I read the fine print, it said that it only applies to undergraduate degrees. And that was really crushing because it was like, it's not helpful to me anymore. And now I'm kind of, I feel like I'm on my own. And everyone was saying, oh, you'll be able to apply for it. No worries, you'll be able to apply for it.
Sure.
And it just, it's meant that I haven't really been able to receive any kind of extra support for study that is actually applicable to my situation.
Yeah.
I don't want to bright side in any way. I just want to say that I'm very surprised that even exists. I mean, I'm sorry that it's not for your graduate degree, but I've never heard of anything like that. And so it's kind of amazing that they have it at all. I just wish it was more expansive for you.
And I think I could be wrong. I think it also maybe applies to high school students as well, which is really good. So I'm super glad it exists. But it is a shame because I feel like not many jobs you can do with just an undergraduate degree nowadays. A lot of places do require you to do further study.
Right.
No, thanks for sharing that. Glenn, let's go back to you. And you talked a little bit about having to quit your job to care for your uncle. And so certainly that had an impact on your career trajectory. Have you been able to, because I know that your uncle has passed, have you been able to return to work? Has this impacted your retirement timeline? How is that all laid out?
So I kind of threw a monkey wrench in my retirement.
Yeah.
So it was a whole bunch of financial juggling that was going on. I'm lucky because we had a good financial planner. So he kind of restructured, our IRAs and stuff. So that wasn't too bad. But quitting a job and being a caregiver is one thing. But that kind of led to some emotional things going on. Like I had a little resentment after a while from my uncle. And that was because you feel guilty because you're mad, oh, my whole life is different. So I had to work through that. It was a kind of difficult time for me.
Yeah.
But, of course we got through it. So, so I'd say in the first maybe 8 months of caregiving, and plus, when you kind of thrust into this role, you have no idea what you're doing. Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, and especially with dementia patients, it's so difficult because the repetitiveness of what they're saying and the emotional outbursts because they're confused. They don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And that was super hard. But, I got through it and, cared for him for 7 years. So,
Yeah.
But so that whole financial aspect of retiring at, leaving at like 55 when I didn't plan to retire, I was going to wait for a bit. That was kind of difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you said that piece about the resentment because I would guess that's very common, right? I think that for caregivers, probably in a lot of different age groups, our careers don't end up being, whether it's our schooling like Ella or your career trajectory, doesn't end up going the way that you expect, whether some people maybe don't go for a promotion or they don't do those traveling pieces or they retire early or whatever that is. And it's hard to not feel resentful.
Yeah. And it was just a whole, because I'm like, oh man, I could have been doing this and and then you feel guilty because you're feeling like that, right? So that was so difficult. That was probably the hardest 8 months of my life. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Was that the 8 months like after you left your job, like that? 8 months?
Yeah. So it's the very beginning of caregiving. Plus, you're so brand new at that. I didn't know what I was doing. Right? You're just kind of learning as you go. That was so hard. Yeah.
And do you see now, because you said now you are 65?
Yes.
You said?
Yeah.
So now are you seeing like friends of yours who like now they're retiring? Like, is there still a comparison of like looking at your peers and seeing how their careers ended up going and being like, well, mine didn't, is that an aspect?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that, we talk a lot here about caregiving as an isolating experience, right? We're here in your house by yourself with this person, right? And nobody really, often people aren't getting it. And so, Ella, when I think about you and you were, 21, 22, 23, and when you look around and you see the people in your age group and what they're doing on a regular day or what they're doing on a Friday night, I imagine it's pretty different from what you might be doing in your life. And so what has it felt like to be in your 20s and seeing friends or acquaintances who are your age spend their days and their nights in a really different way than you do? And has that impacted your relationships with them, or what's that been like?
Yeah, it's definitely been hard. I'd say it's been one of the harder aspects of it. And both of us have definitely lost friends or had friendships grow more distant. And it's tough because that's going to happen anyway. As you move into adulthood, you are going to find different friends and different peers, but it does sort of feel like our ability to like create new networks has been significantly diminished. And that's, I think, been quite hard. And so for me, I've had to find friendship. I found a lot of international friendships. I found a lot of new friends. I found friends through the podcast who are also caregivers. And I've kind of tried to embrace friends who aren't necessarily the same age, but are at similar life stages or are having similar experiences or are just open-minded enough to understand that sometimes people's lives look a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Has that led to any like intergenerational friends? Do you know what I mean? Like you said, you're not so necessarily looking for other 23-year-olds. You're maybe looking for people who are in the same boat. And so has that led to friends of different ages that maybe you wouldn't have hung out with otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think I have more friends now. I mean, I do still have some friends who are of a similar age, but I definitely have friends now that are, say, in their 30s or that are just experiencing, even if they are a similar age, are just experiencing different life experiences than your kind of average person in their late 20s or early 30s, for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I even think about our friend Harriette that we hope to be able to get on here. Harriette is 74 and lives in the same city area that I do. And I would definitely call Harriette a friend of mine, right? And we have a 30-year age difference, and it's caregiving that has brought us together. And so I hadn't really thought about that till you said that, Ella, but I think that sometimes this thing that we have in common can bring us together across the different age generations as well. That's very cool.
Yeah. So Glenn, did you notice ways in which your caregiving role impacted the relationships you had with friends, colleagues, and what it was like to have or be in such a different place with them? Or did you know others of your age who were also caregiving?
No, in the beginning, no. Like you said, so isolating that, I kind of lost touch with most of my friends, and, they knew I was caring for my uncle, but, it did strain a lot of relationships of mine for sure. And, even with my wife, it was such a big change that, it took a lot, but, I'm lucky because my wife's in the business. She's a geriatric nurse practitioner. So,
okay.
So it wasn't that hard, but it still was a big change in our life for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as my friends go, it was kind of difficult, as you get to midlife, we're like, you can do a lot of things, we don't have, the kids are all grown, and we didn't have any that responsibility, and like, hey Glenn, you want to go out for a drink? Oh, I can't tonight,
Yeah.
So those things are a little bit difficult, but
Yeah.
Now I know you certainly you shared on Instagram a lot with your caregiving for your uncle.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's where I first saw you or learned about you, I guess, was from that maybe. And so how did that function as an outlet to
so that really helped
find new connections?
Yeah, for sure, because to share uncle's story, I thought, if I can get the dementia part out, because especially for the Asian culture, there's a lot of like shame stigma behind dementia. You know, a lot of my Asian my friends who are Asian, they won't talk about it. They go, no, we don't talk about it. Don't talk about uncle, or So I thought, I would like to get it out there to the public.
Yeah.
Just say, hey, listen, this is what it's like. And I would document my uncle. It started off as a 365 project where I take a photo every day of uncle. That's how it kind of started, but then it evolved into, okay, let's start talking about dementia, the challenges of what he's going through. And so in the end, uncle actually became kind of a little, a social media kind of because I would be out and people like, hey, uncle. I'm like, who are these people? It was so wild. And he wouldn't know what's going on, but he was a character. So, he would say, hi, and then he goes, who's that? Like, oh, that's one of your admirers. He goes, oh. But yeah, so that actually really helped me in terms of, gaining. And people would actually DM me saying, hey, what do I do if I have this? Or, I'm having trouble with my mom. How can I do? So, I started those, caregiver advice, like a daily advice thing. So yeah, that kind of helped me too. So yeah.
That's great.
Did you see with you and your wife? And again, I mean, great scenario, right? She's trained in this and all of that, and still so hard.
Yes.
And so was it ever tricky to be like you said, like I would guess your peers at that age, they're like, we're empty nesters. We're going on a cruise. We're going on whatever. And you and your wife were, I assume, pretty, I don't want to say stuck, but right. Homebound, right? Because you, especially towards the end, weren't able to do things and to get coverage and all of that. So what was it like to see your retired friends, empty nesters on a cruise or whatever?
I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty hard. Like, hey, we should be on that cruise, But we did do a little respite here and there because we had to,
Right.
And we're just so blessed that we have this community among my friends that kind of help take care. So we'd put uncle like in a respite home for a little bit. And I'd had friends kind of go over and check on him. So, we did travel a little bit, but not as much as we would like to.
Yeah.
But so it was a little bit hard,
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a little bit hard.
Just a little hard.
Yeah. Allison, how about you? You've been a caregiver in your 30s and 40s. What has it been like for you to see people in your age group living a really different life than you live day to day?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, it's tricky because it's the same kind of thing. Like we are recent empty nesters. Our daughter just went off to college, and same. It's sort of like most people, when they become an empty nester, they're like, let's travel, let's do this stuff, let's whatever. And it's like, we can't do that, or even seeing someone recently said, well, you remember how tired you were when your kid was 7. And I was like, well, I think I was tired because I had a 7-year-old, but also because my husband just had half of his tongue removed. Do you know what I mean? And so I think it's just always this sort of comparison of in your 30s and 40s for some people, it's like this age of your career and you might have little kids. And so seeing I was still doing all the hard things that everybody else was doing, but I was also doing this extra other thing on top of it. And so they're like, oh, life is so hard because da-da-da. And I'm like, yes, and there's another layer here as well. And so that's just been a challenge. Or even seeing things that sometimes I'll be like, language that we use or wound care I'm doing or whatever it is that I'm like, this is not the way 40-year-olds are usually talking to each other. Or most wives are not typically, dressing a wound or what, checking their person's oxygen levels. You know what I mean? And so it's just moments like that where you're like, this is not happening next door. And that comparison sometimes can feel really raw, when you realize your reality is so different from the people who are in your age group or anything like that. Yeah. Do you, because Justin, you and I are similar ages, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, Sarah got sick and we were, I think, early 30s, and we were in the process of trying to adopt a child. And so we were in the process of trying to build a family, and she got sick, and like that put the brakes on that. And, you know, spending our 30s seeing our friends have kids and raise their kids, and seeing everyone seemingly around us have this thing that we all really wanted, or we both really wanted, was really hard.
Yeah.
So I think that was, you know, one of the biggest, like seeing what my peers were going through and feeling that in a different place, because, you know, for a number of years there, Sarah couldn't leave the house,
Right.
you know, and they're, you know, doing, you know, school activities with their kids and, you know, trick-or-treating and all of this stuff. And that was really hard. And I think now what I see is we're into our 40s, and, you know, caregiving is not really part of my day-to-day. Sarah's doing a lot better. But as a result of, you know, not going through that phase and not having kids, I'm looking forward to I look towards like the rest of my 40s and 50s. And it feels like for peers, a lot of that is there's milestones around your kids' graduations. Your kids go to college, your kids graduate from college, your kids get married, you have grandkids, like all of that stuff, those markers. Like I just see a blank slate. And I'm sure that we're going to find things to kind of truncate that, or, you know, break that time up. But that's kind of where I'm at right now with it, is just kind of seeing what my peers have ahead of them in the next 10, 15 years, contrasting that to what we don't have there. And so that's been a little bit to go through and work through.
Yeah. What is that when you look at this blank slate ahead of you, like you said? What does that feel like?
It's like I see myself now, and I see retirement. And like I just hit 20 years at my job, and like I have a little bit more than 20 years to get to 65 and retire. So it's like I'm not even halfway done with this career. And all I see is this stretch of like 20 plus years of the same. And yeah, it's been a little tricky to kind of figure out how to relate to the future in that way.
Yeah. I feel like you and Glenn are downplaying things tonight. A little tricky. Glenn's like, it's a little hard. You know, you guys are just
that's
it's
fair.
A little, this is a place where you can say it's a lot hard.
Yeah,
it's a
hard.
lot tricky.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine I see missing all of those milestones while our peers are having them.
Yes.
And anticipating feeling that disconnect, you know? Yeah. So I think, I don't know, mentally I've been focused on that. And I think that's probably not focusing on that for the next 20 years is probably the healthy choice, but we'll see.
Easier said than done. Right?
Brains can be annoying.
Yes. Yeah. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there things that you think are particularly hard, like harder because of the age that any of you are, and maybe easier because of the age that you are in your caregiving life? Ella, are you willing to go first?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So from the things being harder perspective, I'd say the two biggest things are kind of a lack of like material, like housing, all of these things that you're supposed to kind of have sorted out. We've really struggled from that perspective. So financial perspective, a housing, like stable housing, all of those kind of material things that you are supposed to get sorted before all the big life challenges happen has been by far the hardest across the board. And I'd say that's probably pretty common for most young carers, because you kind of start on the back foot. And it's very, very hard to catch up, particularly in today's world and today's economy. And then the other hard thing has just been the struggle to be taken seriously. You know, I feel like when a couple is married and they've been married for a long time, there's kind of this idea. I mean, it's like the name of the podcast, right? Like it's in sickness. And so there's kind of this expectation that, okay, well, yeah, we understand if someone gets ill, that their partner cares for them. I don't feel like there's that understanding or that grace for people my age necessarily. And we've really had to fight to be taken seriously. And there's been a lot of stigma and a lot of shame around the idea that I mean, for both of us, I think for the person who's ill, and also for the person who is the caregiver, because it's like, well, why would you be doing that at this age? Why would you have taken on this level of commitment? Completely not understanding that it's not about age, it's about the significance of the relationship. So yeah, those have been the hardest things. In terms of what, I don't know about easier, but I guess one interesting thing is I talked to friends of mine who started caregiving after some of those milestones like marriage or buying a house. And they say, oh, I wish we had known when we were buying a house that we might need whatever, a one-story house. We might need whatever it is that could have been those accommodations. And so I guess that's something I try and keep in mind is when we do make those big life decisions, particularly I think around housing, that we will be able to say, okay, we want to live in an area that has a hospital. We want to, make sure that we have a house that is accessible. And so that has been, I suppose, a comfort for me when I think about the many challenges that I have in this kind of age frame. I'm like, well, we can do a bit of planning at the very least.
Right. Going back to, you said it's hard to be taken seriously. Has that extended to like in the medical situations, like being younger, having, medical staff take you as seriously?
Yeah, definitely. And even one thing that particularly bugs me, I wish that doctors, or not even doctors, receptionists has been the big issue. I wish that receptionists would just have the kindness to just ask, what is your relationship to the patient, instead of assuming, because I have had, and because it's over the phone, they aren't seeing you and they're making the assumption, they're hearing that I'm young and that I'm caring for someone, and they say, are you the granddaughter? Are you the daughter? Are you the, whatever it is, like, or they'll think I'm a paid carer. There's just no kind of understanding that there could be a relationship like ours, and that someone my age could be caring specifically for a partner, because there is a little bit of awareness, I think, about young carers that care for siblings maybe, or for parents. That does get talked about a little bit more, although that definitely comes with its own host of challenges. But I feel like trying to explain to receptionists, to doctors, we've had challenges getting, we're both now on social security type of payments, the equivalent in Australia, and even that has come with its own set of challenges. And yeah, it's been tough, because you're trying to advocate for your relationship and for just the things that you need, and it feels like structurally and socially no one wants to have it. And that's been really, really hard.
What about you, Glenn? Do you feel like in your age range, is there anything that's particularly hard or particularly easy?
Yeah, for an older caregiver like myself, the physical activity. Like, so when my dad was transitioning, he was bed bound. The turning so he doesn't get pressure sores, and the changing of the briefs, that was so hard. He would, before he was bed, he would constantly fall. And so I'd have to pick him up off the ground. It hurt my back a couple of times. It's just, you try to use good body mechanics, but I'm not 20 anymore. I can't just lift them up like nothing. It was so that aspect was really, really hard. And especially during my dad's transition. Yeah, that turning, that constant turning every 2-3 hours. That really took a toll, both on myself and my wife. Too. So
because I think you and I maybe talked during that time, and you just weren't sleeping either, right? And so again, not sleeping as a 20-year-old, it's never good to not sleep. Let's be honest. But I think it's probably, I would guess that maybe it gets more challenging to miss sleep.
It was so hard. But definitely that physical aspect for us was pretty difficult.
Is there anything that you feel like is easier about being a caregiver at your age?
maybe the level of patience, where I think we're more patient as we're older. So yeah, it was, through my uncle's tantrums, and it didn't really bother me too much. It's like, yeah. Like, okay, whatever.
Right.
I think if I was younger, like in my 30s or 20, I think that'd be pretty hard.
Yeah.
Someone's calling you names and throwing stuff at you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. I think, you mellow as you get older. So.
Right. I don't know if that's true for everybody.
Well, definitely the 60-year-old me was, yeah.
So, we've kind of talked about how caregiving can impact our decisions and our trajectories around school and around work and around retirement, about our relationships with our friends and our colleagues. Are there other categories that you feel like we haven't talked about yet that you think might be unique related to a person's age or stage of life that they're in when they're a caregiver?
I don't know. I think you covered it. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Ella, did you have something?
Yeah. For me, so I know we have talked about kind of work and study, but I think the very specific thing that I have found, and I'm sure other young carers, whether they're caring for parents, siblings, whatever it is, there's this pressure around, but you're losing opportunities. You have too much responsibility and you're losing opportunities. And that pressure is really not helpful, because it kind of puts shame on the caregiver or on the person who's sick in a way that is not helpful. And it's kind of taking a structural problem and putting it on these people that are just doing their best and just trying to get through. And I think it's quite unfair, to be honest, because yes, of course, like we can recognize that obviously there is, it's very hard and it's hard to work, it's hard to study. Sure, there will be opportunities that are missed, but to kind of frame it as this very pessimistic, almost, I don't know, just like you don't believe in the person, or like their life is now over, they have no more opportunities till the end of time. I would just like people to focus on expanding opportunities instead for the young carers that they care about, instead of kind of shaming them for the lost opportunities that they perceive to be there. And I think, Allison, you've been a good model in this respect, in that you reached out to me and asked if I wanted to be on the board of the negative space. And that's kind of taking, and there's other programs as well, in Australia and in other parts of the world that are specifically designed for young carers that will train them up and say, okay, the skills that you have acquired while caregiving are actually valuable, and they could be valuable in the workforce, they could be valuable in leadership, they could be valuable for advocacy, whatever it is. I think if that is the instinct people have of kind of, oh, well, too much responsibility, you're too young and you're losing all these opportunities, and what are you going to do about work, and what are you going to do about school? Maybe instead of this kind of shame or kind of prejudgment, just focusing on, well, how can we actually expand opportunities for young carers, and also recognize that, like, maybe they just need to get through, and maybe they just need to survive and just keep them and that person safe, and maybe we can worry about the opportunities later on.
Well, and I think so much of what I'm hearing today is like, it's that we as a world like have this like timeline of like, here's what happens at different ages.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what are these missed opportunities? You're only 23. Like, what is there an opportunity that only is available to 23-year-olds? You know what I mean? Like, and so I think that we think that things have to happen in a certain order at a certain age. And, for many of us, or some people, caregiving is a season, right? It's not maybe forever, but even if it is, that doesn't mean that it's always going to look in the same way. And so for them to say it's a missed opportunity, it's like, well, maybe the opportunity, you're not doing the opportunity right now, but that doesn't mean it's gone forever, right? And so I think for us to expand not just services, but also our perspective or our mindset of the order in which things can be done or the age at which things can be done or the way things can look, and not just say, oh, all 23-year-olds should be doing XYZ. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about supporters. Are there things that you want supporters to hear about how they can more effectively or sensitively care for supporters who are your age or in your age group? Glenn, do you want to start there?
So what do you mean about support? Like how
people supporting caregivers? Like,
oh, okay.
What about being a caregiver in your 50s and 60s? Should supporters know that they can maybe better support someone who is, going through that at that stage of their life?
And maybe that's your friends, family, community, faith leaders, doctors.
So our, like, we have a bunch of, like, there's about 9 of us that are really close, and we all take turns. If someone's in need, we'll all get together and we'll cook for them. Or like if someone has surgery, we'll all get together. Okay, I'll do Tuesday, you do, you do Wednesday's dinner. And it's like that with my older mom who's 91. If we go on a trip, they all get together and they'll make sure she's fed. They'll go and talk to her. And, so, I think having that is huge.
Yeah.
Surrounding yourself with a community that, that's willing to help out is huge. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it was a blessing when my dad was transitioning, because they would come and check in, or, hey, Glenn, why don't you and Joan go out for dinner and we'll stay here, and we'll call you if anything happens. So that was so nice. Yeah.
So I'm hearing you say that you want people to show up. You want people to be there.
To show up.
To show up, right? To show up, to take, like, to join in it with you, to say, like, we're in this with you. Like, we'll watch over, we'll watch your mom. We'll feed her. We'll, take take a break, right? To show up for you. Yeah.
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 And it was all unsolicited. So that was so nice. I didn't have to go, hey, can you help me out? No, it's just, okay, Glenn, what can we do to help you?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And it was and it's so specific. Like, can I make dinner for your mom or your dad? So that was really, really nice.
Yeah. I'm glad you have those people in your life.
I'm just so blessed to have that, for sure. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ella, what about you? What would you say to people who are supporting, who know a 20-something caregiver in their life, and how can they be supportive of that person?
I'd say the main thing is around kind of reducing stigma and not asking the person what they need, instead of saying, I think my least favorite kind of phrases are, you're too young to be a caregiver, or, this is too much responsibility. That is not helpful to me. It's not helpful to my person. It's just about making the person who's saying that feel better.
Yes.
And so asking what they need, and I think recognizing as well, like I said before, kind of the material things that they might need and they might be lacking. And so whether that is helping with food or helping them, like one thing that was helpful for me was someone sitting down and helping with a rental application, because when you're transitioning to adulthood, you're learning all these new skills, but usually you have a bit more bandwidth to it, and you can, like, work it out, or you're working it out with your person.
Yeah.
If you're doing it all alone and you're doing it under intense stress and pressure, you do sometimes just need help with learning those skills.
Yeah.
And I guess also the recognition, in Australia, we do have services for young carers. And a young carer is classed as someone up to the age of 25. And there is, youth services and all sorts of things you can access. But I think there needs to be a recognition that you are going to get to a point where you're going to age out of those services, and you're still going to be on the back foot. You're likely still not going to have all of the things, whether it's housing, whether it is, work opportunities, whatever it is, you're still going to be on the back foot, and you're going to age out of the services, and you're potentially going to need people and supporters to help you kind of make that transition that most people would be able to make on their own, but you're going to need kind of extra support.
Such a good point. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for your perspectives. This is really interesting. And I think that we'll find a way to be able to hear from Harriette as well. All right. Hello, Harriette, my friend. I'm so glad that you're here with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Allison. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I know you're an avid listener of the podcast, so it's very cool to have you on as a guest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Harriette, today we've been talking about different generations and actually it was, I think, your idea, something you said once at a support group about how this caregiving hits us differently at different ages and stages in our life. And so I know you told me once a story about how you basically have been caregiving since like your wedding day, but I know that it has changed in the last few years. So can you tell us a little bit about who you care for, what happened in the last couple of years that changed it? And then also, we don't usually ask our guests this, but because of our topic today, can you share how old you are?
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Absolutely. You might have to remind me. I should have written.
Yeah, I know. I should. That was too much. I just gave you.
First of all, I don't have a problem sharing that I am 74 years old.
Okay.
My caregiving journey did begin on our wedding day, but I don't need to go into that because we can fast forward to the last few years. I think a lot of what's happened to my husband, who I'm caregiving for, he's had Crohn's disease for about 35 years. Mm-hmm. And I think the Crohn's disease has manifested with all kinds of different ailments in his body, from lung stuff to heart stuff to all kinds of things. And, Crohn's is a very weird disease. It's a very, they're learning more about it. Mm-hmm. But they don't really know all the effects that Crohn's has on a person. And so there's some indication that in the last few years, what's happened to my husband is that he's been diagnosed with COPD. He mm-hmm. was a smoker, mm-hmm. but he quit like in 1986 or something like mm-hmm. that. I mean, mm-hmm. it's been a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But still, that doesn't matter because he smoked for a long time. Mm-hmm. So between that and Crohn's disease does affect the lungs. Mm-hmm. So there is emphysema and just lung deficiency, I guess is the best way to put it. And so since all that's been diagnosed, what has happened in the last few years is his breathing has become way labored. His breathing has become to the point where he can't do a lot of exertion.
Sure.
And ultimately, we were very fortunate to go to Mayo Clinic. And at that point, they diagnosed his pulmonary hypertension, which was very, very severe. And that, of course, has to do with the pulmonary artery that goes from the heart to the lungs. Mm-hmm. And then they also diagnosed the fact that the mitral valve in the right chamber of the lung was regurgitating and causing all the heart problems, and most of the between the pulmonary hypertension and the mitral valve that was causing, and the COPD, that was all in conjunction causing the breathing.
Yeah.
He was able to get a new mitral valve through a research project at Mayo Clinic. But what they also noticed once they did that, and they were able to go into his groin because nobody was willing to open up his chest. Yeah. He didn't have the capability of being able to withstand a surgery that invasive. Sure. And what they realized also was the tricuspid valve in the left chamber is also regurgitating. And that is a very, very difficult valve to replace.
Okay.
And they just didn't feel that Ray had the strength or the ability to withstand. Sure. So long story short, Mayo Clinic did everything that they could. And it got to the point where one of the pulmonary cardiologist basically said, we can keep doing procedures, but you're just going to keep getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and nothing's going to heal you.
Yeah.
So the caregiving did turn into, this has been going on for now 5 years.
Okay.
So that's been kind of my job.
Yeah.
So I retired. I'm a former social worker. I retired from my job. I wasn't quite ready to retire, but when I retired, I thought Ray was doing okay. He was holding his own, and we were going to be able to do some things in retirement because he had retired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 6 months later is when everything kind of started to go south.
Okay. So because that's one of the things we talked about is how caregiving impacts our school or our career or our retirement plans. And so you retired a little early, but you retired because you were not because you were like, it's time to be a caregiver, because you're like, it's time to do some fun things.
Exactly.
But that's not how it ended up.
But it didn't go that way.
So what has it been like for you to see, from the age 69 to 74 in this window of time, your peers who I would guess are retiring and maybe do you have peers who are doing the things you hoped you would be doing and are living a really different life from you? And what is that like? Yeah.
And I can honestly say, which is very hard for me to admit, I'm jealous.
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah.
I mean, I recognize that. And I also recognize, and I do need to say that as difficult as all of this is, it is a journey that has taught me about me. And I've had to sort of reconcile with myself just because of my values and because of what I believe in, that I'm here because I'm supposed to be here. Things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
I've struggled with a lot of grief throughout my life. And without going into all of that, I've had to come to terms with grief is a part of life. Grief is a part of growth. Grief is a part of learning about love and wisdom. And I know, because I love so deeply, that grief is a part of that. Yeah. So I've had to kind of come to terms with my own self, with my jealousy, with the fact that, I retired from a job that I truly loved. It was a stressful job. I did not want to retire. Yeah. But I recognized, because of Ray's Crohn's disease, that he's doing okay. Maybe we have a couple of years. Yeah. And so I've had to kind of take a step back and say, well, we didn't. Yeah. But now I've got something else, and something else that is causing me to seriously pause and take a look at my age, take a look at my capacity, take a look at who I kind of am evolving to be as a person as a result of this caregiving. Yeah.
So speak to that about your age. Like, how do you think that there are parts of caregiving that are harder for you because you are 74?
Yeah.
Such as, what do you think?
I think I just said, I think what's hardest for me is my coping ability. I've always coped with a lot of stuff my whole life. And I will say, Allison, and I want to back up and say, I want to give myself a minute of credit, just in
please.
I do rise to whatever occasion is needed. Yeah. But I'm exhausted. Yeah. I'm exhausted. And I sometimes have a hard time recognizing that. I have a hard time stopping. And when I do finally sit down, stop, take some deep breaths, maybe write a little about how I'm feeling, I recognize that, why do I feel so exhausted? So I've exercised regularly. I've been very active. I love being active. And it's part of my DNA. I've got family members who are like that. Yeah. I'm like, I can't. Right. And then I feel like, what's wrong with me? Right. And I've had to admit that with the stress and the worry and the caregiving of all aspects, I'm tired. And part of it, well, not part of it, I think most of it is my age.
Well, then what's my excuse, Harriette? But no, I think you're right. And I think when you'll hear our friend Glenn, who's 64, I think, said that he has noticed the difference on his body, lifting and doing all this, that he's like, I'm not 20 anymore. Right. And so I think that that's a huge thing to bring up. Do you feel like at 74, we talked about your peers who are going on cruise or like doing trips and whatever, and you're jealous, but do you think that you have peers who are starting to do more caregiving because of your age, or not yet?
I have not quite a few, but a core group of peers that are my age, but none of them are really caregiving at this point.
Okay.
I have one friend in particular who's a couple years older than me, and she has a daughter who has a lot of struggles, but she doesn't necessarily do the actual care. She's there for her daughter, and she supports her daughter, and she worries about her daughter. but at the same time, she's not actively caregiving.
Okay.
I am really, to be honest with you, Allison, of all my peers that are my age, I have one very, very dear friend who is 20 years younger than me, but she helped caregive her father who was dying.
Okay.
And supported her mom. And Chris was one of those that, she dropped everything and would go to the hospital. And so she has been a strong source of support for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also at the same time, that was her father. That was a different relationship. And she tells me stories and examples of that. And it does help.
Sure.
But sometimes I just want to say, thank you.
Right.
And I will take in what you've shared with me.
Yeah.
But I walk away going, but this is my partner in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I think both of us raised 79.
Yeah.
And he struggles with his biggest struggle is that he's old.
Right.
I'm old and I'm sick.
Well, I'm curious to see what might happen as you, God willing, continue to age, right? And if more of your peers end up becoming caregivers or needing a caregiver from their spouse, and if then what might happen when they come to you and say, "Oh, Harriette, I did not know. I did not understand."
They tell me, and I sometimes have a hard time hearing this, but they tell me I couldn't do this, Harriette.
You say, "Well, buckle up, because just wait."
I can't do this. I couldn't possibly do the things that you do. I can't possibly do any of that. And I go, hang on.
Yeah.
When it comes right down to it. And I say this to our friends that visited us recently, who we've known and Ray's known his whole life. I've said to her name is Patty, and I've said, Patty, you can do this.
Yeah.
No, I can't. No, I can't. Right. I said, if somebody had told me 20 years ago that he was going to be doing this, although because of Ray's Crohn's disease, because of certain things that he's been through over his lifetime, I guess I've had some training.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, he had a great career. He had a lot of good friends. He was a golfer. And he had a great life.
Yeah.
And in spite of some of his health issues, did it ever occur to me that this is how my retirement, my older senior years, I keep going back to what my dad used to tell me, that growing old is not for sissies.
Right.
And, I think we get led down this path that retirement and aging is going to be this beautiful time.
Right.
And I think it is for a lot of people. And I'm not going to say that it's not for me.
Sure.
But it's quite a journey. And some days
it's different than, I'm sorry.
No, some days it's a tremendous honor. And I feel it's a gift to walk this journey with my husband. Yeah. But other days, I get a little resentful. I get a little angry.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is my age. I think part of it is, like I said, my coping ability, my resilience, my need for a little more rest, my need for a little more downtime.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Do you think, and the answer could be no, but do you think there's anything that is a bonus or a benefit of being your age and being a caregiver as opposed to other ages?
It helps me prepare for my own. It helps me prepare and recognize that I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm at the age where I could get sick also. Right. I could get sick. And that's something that I do think about even when I'm feeling so tired. Yeah. And even, there's a lot of stuff in my family. And I do have nothing major, but health concerns. And I think, oh my gosh, this could happen to me too. It brings my mindset and my heart to a place where buckle up, and I will also share, which I know you know this, but we don't have children, and we don't have family that's close by.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I get very concerned about also.
Yeah.
Is when this happens to me, if it does, which you probably will.
Right.
And that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
But Ray's teaching me some stuff. Ray's teaching me how to be and how not to be. So, I mean, I'm a pretty kind, gentle spirit. And sometimes it's like, you're an old curmudgeon, aren't you? And he will say, yep.
Right. Yeah.
And I go, okay, I'm going to go take a nap now.
Right. Yes. Oh,
I mean,
well,
he's waiting for me now because it's time for his Entyvia injection. And I said, hang tight. We have a whole day ahead of us.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
well, I am so grateful that I know you and that across generations that you and I have become such good friends. And I think that is a benefit. And I appreciate today that that the technology gods today did smile on us to allow us to have this conversation so that we could have your perspective as well. One last question is, at the end, we always talk about supporters.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want supporters to know or to think about that how supporters could more intentionally support caregivers who are your age?
Check in more. Check in more. I mean, my supporters know me. They know how independent, I guess, I am. But sometimes I just wish some of them would just call and say, how are you doing today?
Yeah.
I think because of who I am and my life journey and the things I've been through and the work I've done, my supporters think, you've got this, Harriette. And I think what makes me sad at times is I'm the one needing to reach out.
Yeah.
And I would say to supporters, especially if you're supporting somebody who is older, to just once in a while send a text, send an email, pick up the phone and just say, I am kind of busy today, but I'm thinking about you. And is there anything you need, or do you want to just vent a little or chat a little? I think sometimes that's what I want, because sometimes, Allison, sometimes it's hard for me to always be the one reaching out.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I'm the one that always goes, hi, how are you?
Right, exactly.
Everything is well in your world.
Right.
If you have a moment, check in with me.
Yeah. Right. It's like another thing for your to-do list is that you have to, And I think that it's almost like you're being punished for how your capacity. Like you said, people are like, oh, she's got this. Harry, it's fine. And like, technically, yeah. Are you rocking it? Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's not hard. And that you don't need someone to check in with you. So yes, I think that advice is good for all of us generations. We all need to be checked in on.
Right.
We really do.
And especially
I think
in this day and age and where our world is at and all the stuff that everybody's dealing with. Yeah. We need to come together more.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think even you told me.
I hope I've been able to answer and just.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. One thing I want to add is you had told me earlier off air about, you were trying to just like lug a big propane tank across your yard and you saw your neighbor and just said, could you help me? Right. And so I think that's another thing. I mean, again, all of us at all ages need that kind of help. But you said yourself that like your body might not be as strong as it used to. And caregiving has maybe knocked it down a little bit even more. Exactly. And so when you're thinking about supporters, it might be like, hey, what is a literal heavy lift that Harriette might have to be doing right now that I can go and do for her? Like, what is something that I can go, that I could take off of her plate, so. Yeah. And
I will add one more thing is that sometimes I don't want to ask because I've always been that way.
Right.
And it took a lot for me when I saw my neighbor out in front of my house getting his mail. Mm-hmm. I had to take a deep breath and let myself know it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
I know I will struggle.
Yes.
I'll get it.
Right.
but I don't, I recognize I don't want to hurt myself because I hurt myself.
Then what, right?
Yeah, exactly. Then what?
Exactly. Well, I'm proud of you for asking. And I hope that next time neighbor guy looks over, sees it, and offers to help before you even have to take that big breath and ask. So,
I've gotten used to it, Allison.
I know.
It's okay. It creates a lot of vulnerability for me, which I think is probably a good thing in some respects. Because, supposedly we learn and become wiser from our vulnerability. So,
well, then, you know what, friend? You and I are the wisest ladies on the planet.
We are some of the wisest people on the earth.
It's true.
Doesn't matter about our age.
True. Oh, so great. Glad that this worked out and that we were able to hear your perspective. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure and my honor. Anything that the negative space needs, I'm here.
Thank you. Appreciate you so much. Okay.
Especially you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Listeners, we're going to have our upcoming support group, and it's possible that you might have a special guest. We might see if Ella, Glenn, Harriette, if their schedules and caregiving lives allow them to be there. So watch for when the date of that will be. And then it would be interesting to hear at the support group as well, if there's other people. Like I said, it's not like Ella's 20-year-old experience is universal for all 20-year-olds, right? And so we would love to hear from other people who have had these experiences in different ages and see how that's impacted them.
And just one more plug as we're preparing for our 100th episode. There's still a little bit of time if you want to call into our hotline you can find that 360-389-2334. If you want to leave us a message letting us know favorite moments or episodes from the show, what it's meant to you, any of those kinds of things, and we'll be putting some of those clips together for that episode. So we're looking forward to hearing from you all on that.
That's the next episode. Next one is 100,
which will be the next episode.
Okay.
Yeah, very
Amazing.
exciting.
Yes. Well, thank you for tuning in. You two, you're in very different time zones than us, and have full busy lives, and it's been great to hear your perspectives today. So thank you for being here with us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.